Welcome to Michigan's WW1 Centennial News Report for August 2015. Mine More Coal, War Effort and Americanism in World War I Posters by Antje K. Gamble. I'm your host, Dennis Skupinski. This will be part 1, with part 2 shown in September. Later in this program, Dr. Gamble will go over her exhibition at the University of Michigan Museum of Art. One century ago, August 1915, British submarines raided the harbor of Constantinople, and submarine E-11 sunk the Turkish battleship Barbarossa Haradin in the Dardanelles on August 8th. On August 5th, 1915, the Germans captured the capital city of Poland, Warsaw. The Imperial Russian Army had been taking part in the Great Retreat, retreating from Galicia back to Russia. On August 21, 1915, Tsar Nicholas II removed the commander of the Imperial Russian Army, Grand Duke Nicholas Nikolaevich. This would have disastrous consequences for the Imperial Russian Army, Russia, and also the Tsar's family. On August 12, 1915, a British airplane sinks a Turkish ship in the Dardanelles by launching a torpedo. This is the first example of a ship being sunk by an airplane. On August 13, 1915, the transport ship Royal Edward was sunk by UB-14 off the coast of Candalusa in the Aegean Sea, just leaving the Dardanelles. She sank within 6 minutes. The Admiralty list of casualties lists 164 lives lost, but reports go as high as 1,800. August 15, 1915 was National Registration Day in Great Britain. Every adult male between 15 and 65 was supposed to register. They were supposed to have their name, age, nationality, marital status, and employment details. In England, these forms were locally organized. The National Registration Bill was pushed through Parliament as a way of dealing with the labor crisis because essential industries were left without key workers after the rush of volunteers to the front. The government also wanted to identify so-called shrinkers or slackers who were not doing their duty for the war effort. On August 16, 1915, U-24, a German submarine, shelled the chemical plant at the English town of Loka. The plant exploited the latest coal byproduct technologies which had been developed in Germany. Local legend has it that a quick-thinking local worker opened a relief valve which sent up an impressive plume of burning gas, so the submariners thought they had destroyed their target and left. The only fatality was one local dog. On August 21, 1915, Italy declares war on Turkey and the Ottoman Empire.
So welcome to the Michigan World War I Centennial News Report. My name is Antje Gamble. I am the curator of an exhibition here at the University of Michigan Museum of Art that displays a series of World War I posters. I was the Andrew W. Mellon Curatorial Fellow here at the museum last year and curated this exhibition as part of that fellowship. I've also just finished my PhD in art history here at the University of Michigan. And so let me tell you a little bit about this exhibition. I started with the idea to just show some of the World War I posters. The museum has around 200 World War I posters, mostly from one large collection that was donated, I think, in the 50s. And they've only been shown once. And so they haven't been on display in a really long time. And because it was the Centennial, I thought it would be really great to start that. And I started downstairs looking at all of the posters and trying to see some of the themes that came out, because I really didn't want to do one of the exhibitions that's just Uncle Sam or the posters that everyone's seen 100 times. There's hundreds of World War I poster exhibitions in the United States going on right now because of the Centennial, and I didn't want it to be the same old one. And so this exhibition is called Mine More Coal, War Effort and Americanism in World War I Posters, and they're all from this museum's collection. I started with this idea of the war effort. So as we'll see in the posters a little bit farther down, coal was really the central war effort material. You couldn't build ships, you couldn't build munitions, you couldn't make the ships go, you couldn't do anything without coal. And it really was central to the World War I war effort. But also there's all these crazy posters about it, right, that both speak to consumers and producers of coal. And so that was really the searching for why there's posters that talk to coal miners was the jumping off point for this exhibition. And so I'm starting here with posters that refer to the war effort more broadly and thinking about not only individuals who worked in war effort industries like steelmaking, shipmaking, ammunition, coal, but also thinking about the larger war effort. So World War I's particular because they really tried to push volunteerism. There weren't rationings, things like that were happening in Europe. And so publicity played a big role in that. And here, the first series, we see, right, will you have a part in victory? So here it's part of the commission for the War Gardens, but also let's look at the imagery. So right after Wilson declared war with Congress, within 2 weeks, a commission came together, partially run by Charles Gibson, who was the famous poster maker and illustrator, as well as a journalist whose name is Creel, came together to make this commission for basically the broader propaganda, including visual arts. And so this new commission, called the Committee for Public Information, worked on a whole variety of propaganda issues. So they wrote news stories, they made pamphlets, they made posters, they made war films, they made children's books, they made tons of different ephemeral objects, all to support the war effort. And for the visual arts in particular, a lot of the imagery comes from advertising. The United States, and this was particular to the United States, was really at the fore for visual advertising. And so we see a lot of those kind of aesthetic principles in these posters. So we take this poster, we have one really big title at the top. You can walk right past it, you can read it right away, right? This is an advertising technique. The other one, right, this is not just any lady planting her garden, right? She is wearing the American flag, right? So she's really a personification of America. She's also giving us a little sex appeal, right? Sex sells, even for World War I posters. And so she's got the kind of uncovered shoulders. She's very beautiful. And then there's kind of more imagery that is a little bit more nuanced. So the red hat she's wearing is not just a kind of fun thing to balance out, you know, the red of her outfit, but is actually a reference back to the French Revolution, what the Patriots wore in combating the monarchical rule. And so all of these things come together in one poster that gives you a kind of universal message of America fighting for freedom, but through these little acts, right? Building a munitions plant, but through a war garden, right? Plant a garden, or every garden is a munitions plant. And so here's another poster, and as we'll see as we go through here, the posters are really different. So even though a lot of them are really based on these standards of advertising, the aesthetics are super diverse. And so here what we have a poster that's not just speaking to the American public at a kind of broader American public, but is speaking specifically to immigrants, right? Just like today, a huge number of the population were either born outside the United States or first-generation immigrants, many of which did not have English as their first language. And so here we're calling to the immigrants of New York City. We see them here on your right. We see Lady Liberty here, right? Again, this idea of America as this beacon of freedom. Also a little kind of fun add-on, the rainbow isn't a rainbow, right? It's the red, white, and blue of the American flag. So this imagery that the immigrants, that bring us your destitute, right? All that stuff, come to America for freedom. And so here, even though this poster is about, the image is about immigrants and freedom, the text is about food conservation. And so these things come together actually in a really interesting way, because this is one of the many posters that was actually published in multiple languages. And so that's where the kind of immigration imagery comes from. And so we, here in the museum, only have the English version, but the poster was at least published in 2 other languages, in Hebrew and in Italian. And the National Archives actually has copies of both of those. And so they would be speaking specifically to immigrant populations in New York for this, in this instance, where people who didn't speak English, couldn't read English, could still be part of the war effort with a poster like this. So again, we have more posters about conserving food and war gardens, and this is another one of the big themes in the war posters. There's a few big themes. Obviously recruitment, the very famous I Want You Uncle Sam poster. There's a huge number of Red Cross posters. There's a lot of posters for other war effort industries in addition to coal, like shipbuilding and steel. But then these war garden posters. And this is a great example, the Eat Less. Again, this kind of advertising motif. You have one main idea that's suggested in red, but then we have this kind of cornucopia image. And this poster is unique in the sense that the background is actually used with multiple different sayings. And so the background, the sayings that would be printed here, actually there's about 3 or 4 unique posters that use the same background. And so they, because they're trying to put out tons and tons of these, and so in order to do that, they were reusing the kind of backgrounds for these kind of stock images. Even though they're reusing some of these and printing other ones in multiple languages, the estimates are that there's over 700 unique poster designs. And so remember, this is also all based on volunteer. So the artists actually came together on their own. They were one of the impetuses to create this committee. They came together and wanted to help the war effort. So it was really an artist-run kind of effort, which is somewhat similar to what happened in places like France. But in the United States, it became institutionalized. It was put into law that the United States is going to spend money on this section of the war effort, and it really flourished. And these posters were printed everywhere, right? So they were printed all across the eastern seaboard for the national campaign, but also states had their own campaign. The biggest campaign in the Midwest was out of Chicago for the Illinois campaign, but they put posters up all over the Midwest, and we have one of the posters here. But most of the states had their own campaigns, and so the number of posters is really, we have absolutely no idea, because it was somewhat clandestine. And so the records, there aren't even records for the national campaign, because artists would make a design, they would take it to a publisher, the publisher would print it, and it would go off into the kind of ether. It was never kind of written down or anything like that. So there was just a huge number of posters, and so just think, 700 designs, but there could have been a run of 1,000 or 5,000 that was shipped all across the United States. And so this was really a huge campaign, especially when you think about the fact that we were only in the war for 18 months. And so to do this huge effort for just 18 months of fighting was really huge. And so here we have 2 more posters, and so this is one of the posters I was talking about. So this was published out of Chicago, and it was specifically for the committee that was in Illinois. And this is also a unique poster because it's not a general war gardens poster. War gardens were specifically kind of targeted toward everyday citizens. Plant their little garden in their backyard, kind of take some of the pressure off of grocery stores and mass production. This was actually specifically targeting these kind of mass produced farms. And this was because when we entered the war, farms didn't start producing more food because they were worried about their prices going down. And so in order to, again, the United States didn't want to impose prices, although that started to happen at the end of the war. They had to encourage farmers in a different way. And so here, there's a specific propaganda effort focused on making sure that these large farms continued to produce at capacity because they weren't producing at capacity. So it says, again, this very basic advertising kind of design, right? Build a silo, save the corn, right? And so again, pushing these large farms to produce at their highest capacity. Above we have kind of one of the most unique posters that we have in the show, and possibly one of the most unique World War I posters designed. And this poster was designed by Charles Livingston. Drew images of nature, and so he was an illustrator for very important nature books, and you can see that here just in the details, these just lifelike fish, and it doesn't look like a typical war poster, right? It's very beautiful. It's got rich colors. I mean, the text is in pink, right? And so again, not the typical red, white, and blue, but really, right, sends the point home. We have these beautiful fish. It's really a kind of work of art, but a very kind of poignant tagline, right? Save the products of the land, eat more fish, they feed themselves, right? Short, simple, to the point, also a little funny, right? Adding a little bit of humor into it, but really a beautiful and very unique poster, just to show that, I mean, there's just a huge variety of types of posters. But again, even this one that's so kind of outside of the box is using these lessons that were learned from advertising and really pushing them to their kind of boundaries, right? How can I make a new kind of poster that still gets a very clear point home that people can just walk past and immediately recognize? And so here's, again, another one of these war posters. And one of the themes that come up in these posters, especially when they're speaking to the kind of general civilian population of the United States, is that they want civilians to understand that they are an integral part of the war effort, right? That they're not just sitting on their couches at home, you know, thinking about it, right, reading in the newspaper, that they are actually a part of it. And so here we have, right, again, a War Gardens poster, War Gardens over the top. And so this one, again, plays with humor. So we have these kind of caricaturized anthropomorphic vegetables that are like the soldiers going over the trenches, right? So we see them coming over the trenches of the garden, right, and really fighting in the trenches, right? So it's equating here, literally the vegetables, but it's equating everyone who produces a war garden, equating them with a soldier in the trenches. And so this kind of militarization of the kind of citizenry was one of the very effective ways to send it home that what you did made a difference on the front, right? It wasn't just a kind of in the ether, or like, oh yeah, I should do this because I could be a good American, but they actually had real effects at the front because you were also like a soldier in the trenches. And so here's one of my favorite posters in the exhibition. I came across it and I just loved it. And so again, one of the kind of central tenets that Creel, as part of the CPI, brought about was, again, to think about advertising, but in a different way, right? Not to sell a product, but to sell an idea. So these posters aren't saying, follow our president, right? The posters don't say that. It's about this American idea and the idea of freedom and kind of overcoming tyranny. And so again, one of the War Garden posters, but right, can the Kaiser? So, which, you know, has its own kind of militaristic language, but then the poster is really kind of hilarious. So you actually have a little portrait of the Kaiser in a jar that's been canned, And this is really unique because it also kind of references the fact that the can was, or the jar was probably reused, because it was a kind of painted white out where the Kaiser then is scrolled over. And so again, a kind of reusing of materials, but also that your efforts at home by canning have real effects and can actually take down the Emperor of Germany. So this is the last poster in the kind of section of the exhibition that is about the war effort. And this is one of the only posters that I put up that speaks to the kind of broader war effort for the war effort industries. And so industries, again, like coal, steel mining, shipbuilding, ammunition. These were obviously an integral part of the real, on-the-ground war effort. And here, again, there's an equation just like equating the citizens to the boys in the trenches. Here we have a Navy man, an Army man, and then the shipbuilder, right? And so again, the shipbuilder, equating the shipbuilder with the boys in the trenches, with the men out there fighting every day, right? These are not just people who are going to their jobs, but they're integral to the war effort. And that really leads into the coal, the posters related to coal.
There were summoned from the hillside, they were called in from the glen, and the country found them ready at the stirring call for men. Let no tears add to their hardships as the soldiers pass along, and although your heart is breaking, make it sing this cheery song. Keep the home fires burning while your hearts are young.